Welcome to our October webinar. My name is Natalie from Orchid, and today Anne and I will focus on security, controls and approvals around the return and credit note processes. Return Material Authorizations, RMA, is Orchid's first module for Sage 300 and is part of the Operations and Inventory Management suite of products. We will also demonstrate today how RMA can interact with Extender and Teamwork for more advanced approvals. First, an overview of returns for Sage 300. Do you need it? Do you need to manage the return and the repair of physical products? Are your customers suffering from poor service? You're losing money through excessive stock write-offs or unrecovered repair costs due to poor item tracking and error-prone manual processes? What if you could track returns and repairs accurately through consistent processes supported by configurable workflows, all within Sage 300? Return Material Authorizations lets you track returns and repairs from within Sage 300. So you can configure your RMA workflows to authorize customer returns, initiate replacement orders, issue credit notes, return faulty goods to the vendor. You have reliable and centralized data with a single source of truth for all information related to returns. So you don't have to duplicate and rekey and check the information that might be in a separate database or in a spreadsheet. And customers can be kept fully informed of the status and the progress of the return, which also helps keep your inventory and financial records kept up to date. So through consistent and configurable processes, you can reduce your stock write-offs, maximize your cost recovery by correctly charging for repairs, improve customer service and satisfaction when dealing with warranty returns and repairs. Before we delve into the presentation, here's an example of RMA in action. As you can see, the return authorization entry screen, the main screen, looks very similar to the OE order entry screen. You can select a customer, items to return, and you can select those items based on prior invoices, serial number, or other, and track a lot of information around your return. When you're ready and you've got all the information, the goods have come back, you can create a credit note, a replacement order, or a vendor PO return. And RMA also includes extensive reports where you can analyze your customer return rate, item return rate, fault analysis reports, track all the different stages of the workflow. But today we will focus on the validation rules that are included in RMA. First, we'll review the Sage 300 security roles that are relevant to create and delete RA documents, as well as to create OE credit notes, that create the related documents. We will then discuss how you can implement business rules through RMA templates and RMA item policies, and use authorizations to override the validations where required. We'll also show you how to enforce Sage price check validations when processing returns. In the third part of the presentation, we will look at how we can do more advanced logging of RMA details and multi-level approvals using Extender and Teamwork. So first, I'm going to hand over to Anne to demonstrate security roles in RMA and how to use RA authorizations.
Thanks, Natalie. Using the Sage 300 security roles, you can set security roles for users such that they cannot create RMA documents or cannot delete RMA documents. Or even if they have access to create and delete RMA documents, you can have a security role which prevents them from creating credit notes. So let's have a little look at this. Logged into Sage 300 as a user is able to create RMAs, but not delete or import or export them. Natalie can add an RMA, but is not able to delete the RMA and is not able to import or export RMAs as per the Sage 300 security group that she has been assigned to. And now signed in as Emma, who is assigned to a role where she is able to create RMAs, delete RMAs, import and export RMAs, but not create credit notes from an RMA, we can see that Emma can create the RMA, can delete the RMA, can import and export the RMA, but when she goes to complete the RMA, which normally enables the credit note button, the generate replacement order button, and the generate vendor return button, you can see the credit note button is grayed out. So she's not able to create a credit note from the RMA. And we've now seen how you can use the different security roles in RMA to control the creation and deletion of documents in RMA and OE credit notes. We're now going to look at RMA authorizations. In RMA, you can create authorizing users, and these users, once they have been flagged as being able to authorize to approve RMAs, these users are allowed to override the validations that can be applied to RMAs. The validations can come from the RMA template, for example, that an invoice is required for all items on the RMA, whether or not you want to check the quantity already credited and not allow more credits to be issued if the quantity already credited is the same as or is greater than the quantity invoiced, whether or not you need to complete each RMA detail line before completing the header, and whether or not you validate the customer claim number, and if that has already been used, then you'd give an error message and not allow the RMA to be entered a second time. You can also apply validations based on the item. So certain items could be set up such that no credit notes were allowed, or no replacement orders were allowed, or that there's a restriction on the date, the invoice date, and credits or replacement orders are only allowed within X days of the invoice date. These authorizing users can also be used when you're creating a replacement order. So if you've enabled the Sage price list or price check validations, and only certain users can change the price list value, then you can set your RA authorizing user up with the same user ID and password as the Sage user ID, and then you'll be able to create replacement orders which change the price for those users and RMAs that have been authorized prior to clicking the Create Replacement Order button. In order to create users for RMA approvals, you go to RMA Setup Authorizations, and here you create the user ID and give it a password, confirm the password, and select Authorize to approve RMAs on this particular user. This user ID need not be a Sage 300 LAN pack, unless you're wanting to approve the price list changes when creating an OE sales order from an RMA. In that case, this user must be a Sage 300 user. The password that you enter here must match the Sage 300 user's password, and that user needs to be able to authorize price list changes in the OE security groups. So I'm logged in as Emma, and based on my templates I have some validations. For my warranty repairs, the invoice number is mandatory on each of the lines. So if I go to add a line, and I do not provide an invoice number, RMA will validate based on the template code that the original invoice number is mandatory for all items on a RMA under the warranty repairs template code. In order to be able to add an item without an invoice number, somebody needs to approve this. So as Anne, as I've been set up as an approver, I can approve the RMA. And now Emma will be able to add an item to the RMA which does not have a invoice number. She would also be able to create a credit note with a quantity greater than the invoice quantity, as well as override the item policy validations, like credit notes not allowed for this item, or a credit note is not allowed unless it's 30 days within the invoice date, or you're not allowed to create a replacement order from this item. And if you're using OE price list approvals when creating a replacement order, this RMA needs to be approved by a Sage 300 user in the RMA. And that Sage 300 user needs to be able to approve price list changes.
Thanks, Anne, for this detailed presentation on Sage security roles in RMA and using RMA authorizations to override validations. In the next part of the presentation, we're looking at using RMA in conjunction with Extender for logging and approval. As many of you probably know by now, Extender is a cost-effective way to tailor and extend Sage 300. You can use it to cater for requirements that can't be met out of the box with Sage 300. Use it with Sage core modules or third-party modules developed in the SDK, such as RMA, which we'll focus on today. All your customizations are held in the database and upgrade with Sage 300. So if you configure logging and alerts and approvals with Extender, when you upgrade to a new version of Sage 300, you just need to upgrade Extender and your customizations will keep working without having to recompile your code. So Extender comes in two main editions: Extender Configurator for logging, alerts, and approval workflow. This is what we're going to look at today using Extender Configurator. You can also use Extender to customize with Python script for validation, defaults, automation, storing additional data in custom tables in Sage 300, and run some apps. So we'll show you how to use the Teamwork app, which is an Extender app integrating AutoSimply chat application with Extender and Sage 300 screens for multi-level approvals and chatting on a mobile app. So we'll show you an example of that applied to RMA. Now I'm going to hand over to Anne to show you how to log changes of RMA details using Extender and how to configure workflow rules, or how to use Extender workflow rules for multi-level approvals of RMA and approving in the chat app.
If you are using RMA with Extender, you can have logging, alerting, and multi-level approvals. So with your RMAs, you can log who changes what when, and you can also alert people of when an RMA is created or when an RMA is amended. And the alert could be via email or by creating an information manager note. And then you can also have multi-level approvals with Extender, and the approvals can be on the Extender console, or if you're using Teamwork, the approvals can be in the AC Chat app. First, we're going to have a look at logging and alerting. So you are able to configure an Extender event to log and or alert somebody when an RMA is either created or when it is changed. And we're going to have a look at an alert on an RMA when it is first created and then when the complete flag is changed. Events are configured in Extender Setup Events, and you can configure as many events as you need. First, we're going to have a look at the logging event, where you can say create a log event which will log any field view that you attach to. The second one we're going to have a look at is the RMA alert event, which has been configured as a send email type of action, and it will send an email using the message ID that we've configured here. And you can include fields from the RMA in the message as we've seen here. And then in View Events and Scripts, you attach the events to the appropriate view. So the RA header view is RA 0001, and we have attached to the complete flag a logging event. To the insert of an RMA, we're going to send an email. And when the complete flag changes on the RMA, we're going to send an email using the same RMA alert template. So you can attach any number of events to any field or action on the RA header or any other view. So logged in as Emma, we're going to go and create a RMA. For customer 1200. And the RMA is going to be applied to the invoice, invoice number 9. And we're going to be repairing one of each of the items on the original invoice. When the RMA is added, because of the event attached to the insert of the RMA, an email is sent. This email message can be configured not to show on this particular screen. And we can see the email has been sent. And having a look at that email, we can see it saying RMA REP 38 has been created by Emma for customer 1200 Mr. Ronald Black, some of the details of the RMA, and the date and time when it was created. And we've also configured the same email to be sent when the complete flag on the header changes. So when we set it to complete and save the record, the same email is sent. And we can see it's the same email, but this time the complete flag is set to true. So we have seen an example of using extender events to send an email alert when the RMA was created and when the RMA complete flag was set to completed. And now we're going to have a look at using extender to create a workflow for the approval of an RMA. And we're going to have a look at the approval of the RMAs on the extender console and using Teamwork in the AC Chat app. We're first going to have a look at the module sitting behind the workflow template and configuration. So the Teamwork RMA workflow consists of a workflow template. So this is our default template for RMAs. And we notice in the finalize approval process that if the post batch is set to yes, it will go and create associated OE and PO documents from the RMA, depending how the return has been created. And this workflow is attached to the complete flag on the RA header. So when somebody sets the document to be complete, that is the trigger for the workflow to start. So that standard workflow template uses the workflow rules to determine which records need to be approved by whom. So by configuration, customers can come to the workflow rules for the workflow approval and define what records need approval, how you determine those records, and who needs to approve them. So in our particular case, all the USA customers need to be approved by Emma and then Anne. And how do we know what are USA customers? The cust account set, which is a field on the RMA header, needs to equal USA. Whereas all the customers in the account set China needs to be approved by Terence only, and all other records, so all remaining records, need to be approved first by Natalie and then by Steve. So when you're determining which records need approval, the how, you can choose any field from the RA header, the first RA detail line, or any RA header optional field, or you can say this particular rule applies to all records. And then for the options, here we say, do we want to create chat messages? And if we do, what is the AC chat approval template? Do we want to send email messages, yes or no? And do we want to auto post? Because we've said yes here, that will mean that the workflow template on approval will go and create OE credit notes and an OE replacement order and a PO vendor returned, depending on the functionality or depending on the values set on the RMA itself. And this AC chat template is defined in AC chat. As a chat associated with an RMA. And in AC chat, you can update optional fields, you can preset users, and you can run a custom inquiry so that from the handheld, you could do a custom inquiry if you need further information to approve a particular RMA. So let's assume in order to approve an RMA, we need to know the RA total amount, the RA cost, who entered the RMA, and what the applied invoice number is. And we also need to know the ship to address of the RMA. So we're making these queries available to the handheld users when approving an RMA. And that's the setup you need to do a workflow around an RMA. So now I'm logged in as Natalie, and I'm going to go ahead and create an RMA for customer 1200. And we're going to apply the RMA and the credit note to invoice 9. And for both these items, we're going to credit a quantity of 1, or the customer's requested a quantity of 1 to be credited. So this would follow the normal RMA process. And when the goods are returned and inspected, and if it's decided to issue a credit note or a replacement order, we would adjust the RMA flags accordingly. So we're going to create a credit note for both the items. And the items are being returned into inventory. And at this stage, I'm going to complete the RMA. And this is the trigger for the workflow to start. So we see we get a message from the workflow that a workflow is required. And because 1200 is a USA customer, Emma and Anne need to approve one after the other. And the RMA status will remain open until approved through the workflow. So if Natalie tries to make it complete again, she'll get an error message that the workflow is in progress and the status cannot be updated without the workflow doing it. Because Natalie has admin access to the workflow console, she can view all, and she can see her return, number 4, is waiting for Emma to approve. So Emma signs in using AC Chat and can see the new message for return number 4, and it's waiting for her approval. She sees the details that after Emma approves, then Anne's going to approve. So before she can approve, she's going to double check the RMA cost. She can see it was entered by Natalie. The total RMA amount, which will be the credit note amount, is $191. The cost is $140, and the original customer invoice is number 9. And she can also check the ship to address. So she can type in a comment. And she could chat to any of the members of this particular chat group. So she's going to go ahead and approve. And she can see that the next approver is now Anne. It's waiting for Anne to approve. And Natalie on the workflow console, once it refreshes, can also see that Anne is waiting to approve. And any Sage 300 user who has access to RMA can use the AC Chat Teamwork integration, which shows all the messages created through Teamwork back against the original source screen, in this case RMA. So we can see that Teamwork created the chat. It was waiting for 2 approvers, Emma, one of 2, and then Anne. Emma made a comment, and then Emma approved, and now it's waiting for Anne to approve. So Anne can either use the AC Chat app if she's not in the office, or she can use Sage 300 and the workflow console to do the approval. And here we can see, if I look signed in as Anne, if I look at only those records assigned to me, I can see the RMA completion approval for return number 4. And from here, I could drill down to the underlying RMA document. So I can check all the values that have been entered, the quantities, how the RMA details have been set, but I also see the full history as if I was in my AC Chat app. I can still see the history of the details that have happened so far in AC Chat for this particular return document. So assuming that Anne is okay with this, she can go ahead and approve on this console, and needs to type in a comment as well. And at this point, the RMA will drop off the console. But because we had configured in the template to auto post any documents, and because both those lines had been configured to go on a credit note, we can see that the approval process has created the credit note. So if we go back to that RMA, we can see credit note 4 was the last credit note created for this particular RMA. And if we drill into that credit note, we can see both the items are on the RMA, apologies, we can see both the items are on the credit note for a quantity of 1. And the credit note subtotal is the same as the RMA total, and the costs are the same as what were on the invoice. And from an audit point of view, if you go to the extender queries and look at the workflow summary, let's look at the one for return number 4 and go down to the detail. We can see that Natalie created the RMA. Emma then approved the RMA, and if we want to see the values that she typed in, we can. And then Anne approved the RMA. We can see Emma's comment and Anne's comments. The other records in the workflow log for return number 4 relate to this first one was when the RMA was first created by Natalie. The complete flag went from nothing to not complete. So the workflow would start because the complete flag changed, but it would close automatically with the status of, with the message of no approval required to mark the RMA as not complete. And the third record was to do with the fact that Natalie tried to mark the RMA as complete again. And this time the message is updated that it was marked complete because the workflow record already exists for this particular RMA. And that concludes the example showing multi-level approval with the Extender console and with the Teamwork integration and the AC chat app.
Thanks, Anne. In summary, we'll point you to some resources that are very useful with RMA in particular, also with other Orchid modules. So for more detailed information, you can log on to the Orchid website under Resources. If you log on as a partner, you'll have access to product downloads, including Orchid sample data for different versions of Sage 300. And that will include RMA configured with different templates with different rules. So you can look at most of what we've looked at today. You also have the application object model, which includes the application object model for RMA, which may be useful if you're doing custom reports or other customizations around RMA. And you also have NFR codes, serial numbers for the different versions, which you can use to create a 30-day trial code for RMA. You can also access the RMA online help, which has release notes with the new features into every release, training video, FAQs, as well as detailed examples and detailed explanations of how every screen works. And we're now ready for questions on RMA security roles, RMA authorizations, using Extender with RMA.